So the question is, what single technique do you think is most useful for a smart, motivated person to improve their own rationality in the decisions they encounter in everyday life? Well, it depends on where that person has deficits. So the first thought that came to mind for that answer was hold off on proposing solutions until you've analyzed the problem for a bit. But on the other hand, if we're dealing with someone who's given to extensive, deliberate rationalization, then the first thing I tell them is stop doing that. If I'm dealing with someone who's ended up stuck in the hole because they now have this immense library of flaws to accuse other people of, so that no matter what is presented to them, they can find a flaw in that, and yet they don't turn at full force that ability in upon themselves, then the number one technique that they need is avoid motivated skepticism. If I'm dealing with someone who tends to be immensely driven by cognitive dissonance and rationalizing mistakes that they already made, then I might advise them on Cialdini's time machine technique. Ask yourself, what would you do if would you do it differently if you could go back in time, in your heart of hearts, or the pretend that you have now been teleported into your situation spontaneously. So some technique like that, say. So, but these are all matters of sort of, here's a single flaw that the person has that is stopping them. So if you sort of move aside from that a bit and ask sort of what kind of positive counterintuitive technique you might use, then I would say hold off on proposing solutions until you understand the problem. And just that one, or in the case, well, but the question was about everyday life. So in everyday life, In everyday life, I guess I would still say that people's intelligence might probably still be improved a bit if they sort of paused and looked at more facets of a situation before jumping to a policy solution, or it might be rationalization, cognitive dissonance, the tendency to just sort of reweave their whole life stories in order to make it sound better and justify their past mistakes. That doing something to help tone that down a bit might be the most important thing that they could do in their everyday lives. Or if you got someone who's giving away their entire income to their church, then they could do with a bit more reductionism in their lives. But my guess is that in terms of everyday life, that either one of holding off on proposing solutions until thinking about the problem, or against rationalization, against cognitive dissonance, against sour grapes, not reweaving your whole life story to make sure that you didn't make any mistakes, that you're always in the right, everyone else is in the wrong, etc., etc., that one of those two would be the most important thing.